Hi there, Glocal citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around manifesting a new world. I am your host, Florence Adu, coming to you from a lovely, mellow sandalwoodsy lounge. I am in the East Legon neighborhood of Accra, and I am sitting down with a lovely, soon-to-be, hopefully, collaborator, a wonderful human that I've met recently. So let me get to her bio. With over 20 years of experience spanning both international and U.S. contexts as a classroom teacher, school leader, coach, designer, and professor, she possesses a unique skill set. This includes shaping innovative curricula, effectively supporting learning communities of all sizes, and coaching leaders to drive impactful change. Her design background informs her expertise in project-based learning approaches, performance assessment, and liberatory praxis. She collaborates with schools and education organizations to design critical, responsive, and loving curricula, assessments, and professional learning opportunities. She's founder and executive director of the Tutu Institute of Education for Liberation, as well as senior director of professional learning at ASCD Ghana. Among her other roles on boards and consulting, she is a research fellow and adjunct professor at Claremont Graduate University. She recently co-authored The Teachable Moment, engaging our kids in the joy of learning to support parents and caregivers with providing project-based learning experiences at home. Laureen Adams-Tutu. Miss Laury, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you so much.
Yay.
Happy to be here.
Wonderful. So let's get started. Where are you from? Where are you local? And what is your craft?
I am originally from Long Beach, California, but kind of grew up all over because my father was in the Air Force. I am locally here in East Legon, Accra, Ghana, and my craft is education.
Okay, nice. So you mentioned living all over, and I guess I'll just jump right in and ask you why the where. So how did you come to be living, working, and playing here in East Legon, Accra?
Yes, so I studied at the University of Ghana when I was an undergraduate student in my final year of college, and I loved it so much that I was trying to figure out how to stay here. In fact, I was trying to figure out if I could do grad school here, but there was no financial aid for foreign students, so that wasn't going to work. But when I left to go back to the States, I knew that at some point I would come back, but I didn't really know in what capacity. And because I had lived outside of the US as a child, and I feel like it really shaped me into being a global citizen, it was something I really wanted for my own children. So when the opportunity came, think about moving outside of the US, I was certain it would be somewhere on the continent and originally thought South Africa, but I brought the children to spend time both here in Ghana and South Africa, and the children preferred Ghana.
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
It
so
is
where
interesting.
where in South Africa did you go?
Johannesburg.
Oh, okay.
Mhm.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
My oldest daughter and child, she thought that Johannesburg was too much like the States. And she's like, if I'm going to move to Africa, I want to feel like I'm in Africa. And I was like, that's profound. And I feel you.
Yeah.
So we came here, which was great because, you know, we have family here and I do still have friends here from a long time ago. So there was more community here already for us.
Interesting. I like that. So when was it that you decided, because you did raise your children partially in the US. And so what was that catalyst that made you decide, okay, it's time and I want to do this now?
A couple things. So I was considering my children's ages and like when would be an okay time to move that wouldn't be too disruptive for like schooling or their developmental stages. That was part of it. And then where I was in my life, like I wanted to finish. I did a doctoral program, so I finished that, was kind of figuring out my next steps, trying to establish some connections in South Africa, because that was originally where I was thinking of going, to make sure that I wasn't just going somewhere without having something set up. And when we were getting close to moving, actually, the pandemic happened. And soon after the George Floyd incident, which I think drew attention to issues that I had already known about. And many of us, you know, endure, especially when you're raising Black children in the US. But I think it heightens the urgency to move here because I was very fearful of my children just living in the US, especially when I didn't have eyes on them. Like if they wanted to go to school and I couldn't be there, they wanted to go to the store. Like it's just like my anxiety around their well-being really heightened. And I was like, this is the time.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, understandable. Most definitely. Wow. Okay. Let's talk a little bit more about the you that you brought, right? You came and studied in Ghana. And what did you study? What were you studying at the time?
Well, I took an extra year to study here, so I didn't really need any of the classes. I came for the experience, and I had an experience. But I double majored in English and African studies. So when I was here, I really took African studies courses. And that's actually what got me into pursuing education, was spend my time here in Ghana. Because up until that last year in college, I had always thought I was going to go to law school. In fact, I studied for the LSAT while I was here. And then I'm like, oh, I'm not going to take it. Because what I experienced in school here at that time, especially in the African studies courses, was a lot of inaccuracies about the history of Africa that were really problematic, and really contributed to the colonial legacy and imprint that we experience really deeply across the world, but I would say very much so here in Ghana. And I was like, oh, okay, this is it for me. Like the light bulb went off. And then I thought about what schooling's like for Black children in the US. And I was like, it's like this everywhere in the world. So what part can I play in changing that?
Right. Wow. And so where did you start once you went back?
It was, I want to say random, but I don't think it was at all. One of my mentors who actually encouraged me to come study here at the time, he was working for an assemblyman who represented Compton, California. And Compton was having a teacher shortage, and they were desperately recruiting anyone who had just finished college to come teach. And so I applied for that program while I was in Ghana. I left Ghana on a Friday and started the program on a Monday when I got back to the States and did a really intense teacher training program and student teaching. And then, not surprising if you know much about Ghana, my grades didn't come back in time for me to graduate that August. Wow. So I lost that position, and my grades didn't post until December. So I had to wait another cycle. But by then, a friend of mine told me about a program in New York, the New York City Teaching Fellows program. So I applied to that because it's like, oh, they pay for your master's. You start at a regular teacher salary. So I went and I did that program.
Okay. Right. Teaching Fellows.
New York City Teaching Fellows, yes.
Yes. Very interesting. I am familiar with that program, and kind of an interesting parallel story is, so I turned to teaching because all of my growing up, first I was going to be a doctor. Then I had an internship and I was like, oh no, the hospital is not my place. And then maybe the next summer, and this was in high school, I did the summer advertising program at University of Colorado. It was a medical device company, Baxter Medical. I don't know if they're even around. They had an advertising program targeted for young people of color. And we spent a week coming up with learning about advertising and coming up with advertising campaigns. And so I was like, oh, this is me. Business. My team won we got the best project or proposal or whatever. And so I was like, I think business is more where I want to be. University comes around. I end up choosing a university that actually doesn't have a business degree. So I fell into engineering, and the engineering that I fell into was industrial engineering. Now they call it management science and engineering. And that is the business engineering, right? It's industrial, it's all of that. And then I had more internships. So I did a program called Sponsors for Educational Opportunity, SEO, summer in New York, loved it. That's how I ended up living in New York. But the banking sector was not for me. And so then I did the soul search, right? I feel so fortunate to have been able to have these soul search moments. So I did the soul search, and I said, what changed my life was having a Black teacher in sixth grade that 100% believed in me and accelerated me. Even, I had a pretty decent fourth grade teacher, but that sixth grade teacher was the champion that put me on the next path to be all that I could be. And I said, if I could do anything, I want to be able to do that for some student, right? And so that's why I chose Teach for America. So I initially wanted to be in New York. I ended up in DC, which was perfect because New York was a whole other place. So I say all that to ask you about your experience teaching in New York and how that impacted the way that you then saw yourself moving through the education sector.
So even though I lived all over the world and all over the States, I still feel very much like a Californian. And that's pretty laid back,
Yeah.
kind of go with the flow. So New York was culture shock for me. And I was teaching in the South Bronx, and they put me in a 7th grade class, which is
That age.
that if you can teach 7th grade, you can do anything in the world,
Yeah,
I believe.
I figured it out. I
Yeah.
taught 7th grade science.
Yeah.
And it was
Absolutely.
tough at first. And then, yeah.
Absolutely. And I'm glad that that's where I really started my teaching career,
Yeah.
because then it's like everything else was easy after that.
Yes.
Like I can do
Yes.
anything.
Yeah.
I didn't know a lot about teaching. I mean, similarly, I was like, I want to be, someone who champions Black students. And in the case of the Bronx, it was Black and brown students. I want to be someone who helps facilitate like understanding of self and feeling that young people have the capacity to self-determine, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in this program, they often put the people in the New York City Teaching Fellows program, at least at that time, in some of the toughest schools because those are the ones that are hard to staff, right? So in this program, they focus a lot early on about classroom management and like how to run a tight ship kind of thing, colonial, right? And I took some of the advice. Some of it felt a little intense and didn't feel good in my body when I was trying to enact some of those things, like to keep the kids in order. And I learned very quickly that relationships is really what makes teaching and learning work, makes it beautiful, loving, can be easy. Of course, it can be challenging. And so as I progressed as a teacher, I think I started to understand that more and also understand the importance of compassion and understanding young people holistically and what they're coming to school with.
Mm-hmm.
And that not everyone's ready to learn at the same time because maybe their parents haven't been home in a week. They don't have lights at their house. They haven't eaten. All of these things that just we don't often take into consideration when we're, in these high stakes testing environments like I was in at New York at the time. It was very much like they need to score this, test, test, test. And that just helped me really think about the humanity that's needed to do education well and centering love in education in my work.
Yeah, I hear you. We are kindred souls because, so yeah, that was what I took into deciding what program I was going to do in graduate school. So I was either going to go into education policy or public policy. And because of that, understanding what was going on in my kids' families, in the home, it wasn't about what was going on in the classroom. It was that this person didn't have a job, this one is in jail, this one is this. And so where I went was economic development. I was like, there has to be a way to plan the ways of people's lives outside of education policy. And so you now understand that there's more outside the classroom, and yours is about making the classroom more effective, right? And training teachers or understanding the curriculum that turns the needle to empower students, right? And in that way. Tell us more about how you decided to go into your doctoral research and then how that now is playing out in your career here in Ghana.
Sure. So when I left New York, I taught there for 5 years. I decided to move back to the Bay Area because I had my daughter and I had more community in Oakland. And I was fortunate to get hired at a charter school that was leap years ahead of other schools.
Which was
it? Part of Envision Schools, but
Envision.
Specifically it's called Envision Academy of Arts and Technology. And it was run by a sister who is still a dear friend and colleague. We work together now. It's been almost 20 years. This is where I was introduced to project-based learning, where I was introduced to an advisory model where a group of 20 students gets assigned a teacher that they loop with for 2 years. And we have these built in our schedule time to build our relationships with these young people, to help them set goals, to work on social emotional learning, even though that wasn't the language we were using at the time. All of these really powerful and profound experiences in addition to project-based learning and in addition to assessing students holistically, which was really hard for my brain to understand at first because it was just so different than like the multiple choice, the Scantron tests and assessments that we did so much in New York. And that's where I realized that I was super curious about relationships and how it impacts learning. Because when students feel seen and validated and I think loved, at the time I was using the language of care, but loved, they show up differently in school, right? And it lowers their affective filter. They might be more apt and primed to learn. And that was just so profound to me. So that got me curious about what kind of research or studies have been done around those relationships. And not just, I'm really interested in adults and how they work with learners, younger learners, but also just in general, the school culture, the relationships among everyone in a learning community. And then I decided I would have greater impact if I moved outside of the classroom and went on to the next level. So that's what got me into the doctoral program.
Since we're talking about some of your movements, we want to hear what you hear. Can you share a word, a phrase, or a saying that is a meaningful part of your local experience, wherever local you've been, that has embedded itself in your mindset, that has been a meaningful part of your local experience, and how or why you've come to value it as Glocal speak?
Ooh, immediately a word came to mind, and then the more I was listening to your question, another word came to mind, but I think I'm going to go with the first because so love.
Yeah.
Still. And here, like in Tree, like Odo. I love that so much. Just the concept of it, the embodiment of it, and it actually guides everything that I do.
Yeah.
And so no matter where I am in the world, like it is that concept and whatever word, language it comes across in that space, it's that drives me.
Yeah. Yeah. I like that. It's so fitting for the place. I'm looking at a carving that has a heart. And I mean, the ethos is here. We understand. We understand. Okay. So you've relocated, you've come to Ghana. Tell us about that landing, because did you come as an entrepreneur? Did you have a soft landing? What was that transition like?
It was a lot. Also, it was during the pandemic. So imagine waiting for borders to open and trying to ship things when there's no contact and all of this in LA. I had a job when I came here. So I had a full-time remote job and
It was based in the US.
It was based in the US. I intended on keeping it while I was here. It became increasingly more challenging. The time.
Yeah.
And because the transition of moving, it was me, my 3 children at the time. My oldest has gone back for university, and my mother. Just like trying to be supportive to all those people and navigate like getting to know this place in a different way. When I was here before, as a student, people took care of a lot of things for me. And this time I had to figure out a lot more. Fortunately, again, we have family here, so we had support. But yes, it just became too taxing. So I ended up resigning from that job. And plus my hope, and still is, even though it's hasn't been easy, my hope and intention is to really like do my work here. And here, not just in Ghana, but on the continent. So the landing was softish in that I had some stability with the job, but it was a lot to support for other people's transition in addition to my own.
Yeah. That's real talk.
Yeah.
Yeah. So when did the Tutu Institute become
a thing?
So
I think I'm rebranding that, by the way, to Odo Institute because it goes.
I love it. It makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense. I had a hard time thinking of like the name for the institute. Like I knew the thing, but it was just.
You got a scoop here, folks. Be looking out for it. Yeah.
So I was thinking about it probably within the first year that I was here. Like, okay, let's grow the work beyond what I'm able to do as a consultant, as a professor. Working with some organizations here and there, and how can it be more of a co-created space and experience exploring what education for liberation can be. And so the thinking behind it was really to involve more folks in helping to curate, research, and co-create learning experiences that really center African people in ways that are anti-colonial and in service of our liberation. And so I was mulling around with the idea for a while. I talked to some elders here about it, got some input and feedback and register the organization, but it's a lot of work when it's like one person.
Oh, yes. Yeah, solopreneurship is a whole thing.
And because I'm one person who has many hustles, it's like, okay, well, right now I got to focus on these things. I got a daughter in university and, life.
And school-age children who are at different phases.
A lot. And I don't have the energy I used to have. I used to be able to do all these things. Now I'm like, okay, I do have some organizations that are partnering already with us to like develop some infrastructure on the website.
Okay.
And yeah, it's like growing work that I just need to grow more and need others to support in the growth of it.
Yeah. It's a beautiful thing to have that as an anchor vision, right? So I think that that's a big part of also what feeds into your work with ASCD and also in your lecturing, being a professor. And so let's fast forward. You had a really intense last few months with travel to the US and doing some really interesting things. I'd say of an intense full year, because part of what culminated in your appearance, your talk at South by Southwest. And is it the southbysouthwest.edu or is that how they brand it? Mm-hmm. The EDU. What culminated, what created that opportunity is this conference that you all did last year. So tell us about that work.
Sure.
And then tell us about the session and the feedback. It was a great session. There will definitely be links to the session in the show notes. So tell us about that.
Thank you. So we decided last year to host an International Educator Summit. And we are a very small organization with big dreams.
And, this is
Ghana ASCD, yes. And we pulled off something so amazing. I'm still in awe.
Yeah.
We're having another one again this year.
Yeah, I heard.
Yes. We put on this 2.5-day summit, and the then Minister for Education saw the people that we had coming. We had a lot of diaspora coming to do sessions and workshops, and said, well, look, you have all of this expertise in-house, like in country. We need to bring educational leaders from across the country to experience, get some professional learning out of this. And so he's like, can you add another day? And it's only for educational leaders in Ghana. And we're like, okay. He's like, I'll get it funded. And he did. So we hosted this masterclass for Ghanaian educational leaders. We had about 250 come from all over the country. We had these really great topics about leadership and 21st century learning or future ready skills, all of the things we say in education now, and followed it up with these deep dive sessions where folks really got to explore how to put these practices into place in their context and what challenges they might have, whether it's like lack of infrastructure, resources, and so on, and develop a plan. And then they stayed in touch with the facilitators and their community to support them along the way. And how this informed the South by Southwest piece is that the two sisters that co-planned this leadership masterclass with me, we all kind of wanted to make sure that we were coming in with some humility and like really making sure we were meeting the needs of educational leaders without thinking that we knew what was best, but we wanted to learn from them. And so we took a stance really early on that we were going to try to disrupt the ways that we've experienced professional learning and really seek input to inform the way we designed even what workshops we offered and the flow of the day. And so we did that. And then that's what led to us kind of reflecting on what we did differently, what we saw as the successes with that. And then we're like, okay, we should talk about this because we had some great learning from it. And then we proposed a session at South by and
they said, yay, bring it. Yeah. So where I found, let's get into the nitty gritty of this ways of teaching and ways of developing curriculum, because where my now interest and focus is on exactly what you're focused on as liberation and mindset in the ways that we're teaching. And so some of the takeaways that I took from the session was that this hierarchy that is embedded in the system is nearly 100% to our detriment, because those it seems like all the time when it is the folks that are on the front line doing the work and understanding what's necessary, they're being dismissed and not being empowered to do that work, and then not having visibility and feeling culturally, just because of where our culture is, feeling disempowered. And so I found myself thinking, do teachers in Ghana even like kids, or even like teaching as a profession? So you've been in it, you've been observing it, you're in this space. What have you found in that way? And then how then, knowing this, do you think about what curriculum looks like? If it matters, if you're still dealing with teachers who are sometimes into it.
Okay, that's a big question. I think there are so many structural issues that impact the way a teacher might engage with being a teacher here, right? So it is a lot of top-down directives. And there are also these ways of teaching that have just kind of been for a long time that folks just kind of do because that's how I was taught, right? I know that Ghana has, in public schools, has rolled out a new curriculum, and it is much more learner-centered and definitely highlights Ghanaian history better than previous, like British curriculum, right? And I say this lovingly, curriculum it isn't teaching kids,
right?
It's people, right?
Yes.
And so the pedagogy shifts that are necessary for learner-centered teaching are so radically different than what's happening and traditionally been happening in schools here. So if folks aren't getting the right support and are expected to do something, again, radically different from what they've been doing, I can imagine that it's going to create some resentment, frustration, lack of self-efficacy, like all of those things. Although there are a lot of supports that are trying to be put into place, I just think that anytime you try to roll out something new at a national level, it's going to be a challenge, right? Like we're in the infancy stages now, and we got to have some grace for folks. But I just think that there are so many practices that I've seen in private and public schools, so not even just public schools here, that are so reminiscent of things that
they're outdated, basically.
They're outdated. That's a nice way to say it. Yes.
Yeah.
They're outdated. They are oppressive. They silence young people. It's about conforming. And
so even, you started to touch on this when you were uncomfortable about the way that the New York Teaching Fellows program made you feel, first of all, the discipline, but then also teaching to tests. That is a big part of the gates and the gatekeeping that goes on in Ghana's education system. Is this curriculum at all in your estimation? And I'm sure you have, I'm not sure if you've looked at it through the whole K through secondary school, breadth, but is it now what the goal was in revamping it? Is it changing how equipped students are to just be, or just to pass a test?
I don't think we know enough yet. It hasn't been implemented long enough to know. They're still taking tests.
Yeah.
And from my purview, I'm a fan of performance assessments and of course, project-based learning or inquiry-based learning, because I think that's more authentic.
Yeah.
And that equips young people for the
Life,
world that they're going to inherit. And yes, to work with others, to be successful at a job or career. And that's missing from my estimation. I haven't looked at it from
the
K
full,
through. Yeah, I've looked at, certain secondary subjects. And again, I just think it's baby steps. I think there's so much about it that is going in the right direction. But to me, fundamentally, everything is a pedagogy issue. Because I never taught a curriculum that was handed to me, even when I worked in New York.
Right. Yeah. I didn't either.
Yeah.
Yeah. I riffed and made it up and made it real.
Yeah. And so you really need to have people in there who know
how to be creative.
Yeah. And know what they're doing, want to do it, and want to do right by young people.
That's it. Very basic. So it sounds to me like the dynamics of our economics make it a little bit challenging to know right now, right? To know the motivations of people who are in classrooms, whether or not it is that they are doing it because, so like me, I had a teacher that I loved, and that's why I knew I wanted to do right by some students, versus in a lot of our African contexts, I believe it is And I think this is inherited from the British system, is kind of the tracking that then puts you in a place to study something that you may not have liked. So you're always kind of potentially in this conflicting relationship with education and training.
And I know something that I've observed here is that with the national service, a lot of folks get placed in schools for their national service and then just kind of stay because they can't find another job. So they haven't really been trained as teachers at first, and they're like already teaching young people. Maybe they're learning along the way, which is what a lot of people do. I mean, there's nothing necessarily wrong with that. But when you're talking about the economics, it's like kind of like a forced job versus what they truly desire.
Right. And we continue to see children as not the assets. We retrain them and they're not becoming the assets that we know that we need them to be by perpetuating these systems that are what they are. Whew. Well, let's talk about mindset then. And I want to then go back to the session and then what's next with the upcoming conference. So what is your mindset hack? So we've kind of talked about this heavy, or just real reality checks and reality stuff. So what is your mindset hack? How do you change your mind? Something you imagine, something you do, or something you could,
It's a gratitude practice.
I love it.
Yeah. And I haven't been consistent all the time with it, but recently I've been really good with it. I saw this post on Instagram a month or so ago. I was talking with a friend in South Africa, actually, who was just kind of like in a funk, like just kind of on the hamster wheel of everything's going wrong in my life. And so I was trying to be encouraging, and I was like, what can we celebrate right now? What is going well? And like, of course, the phones listen to you. I see a post that says, good things are always happening to me. And I was like, I gave him that prompt and then I gave it to myself. And I was like, just one thing every day that's good, just write it down, like, and be thankful for it. And I've done it. I mean, more than one thing every day, but like I have this list. It's hundreds of things just for the last few weeks. And, every now and then I get in that place where I'm like, something's not working out. And then I look at that list. I'm like, wow,
so much is. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, especially given the times we're in. We're in some really tough times, and we're
really tough times.
We're gonna have to make it.
Right.
So yeah. And this teaching is a big key piece of it. So tell us about the conference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This upcoming one, or
the upcoming?
Just in general?
Yeah. I mean, because I'm sure it's kind of an expansion of what you did last year.
So it's going to be July 18th through 20th at the same location, which is ICS International Community School in Accra. We decided to go hybrid this year because while we had a lot of enthusiasm from people outside of Ghana, the cost was really prohibitive. And then sadly, because of the administration in the US, some of the funding that we relied on last year wasn't available to us this year. And so, we're just trying to figure out how to make it work because people wanted to see it happen again. So we're really excited about that. So we're using an online platform called Huva.
Is that a new one?
It's been around for a little bit, but it's cool. You'll have access for those who aren't joining in person to the content for 3 months. There's ways to interact with other participants privately or in group chats. And it's a really cool platform. So we're excited about that. And right now we have, I don't know, like 120 presenters, all kinds of workshops. We're really looking at innovation and sustainability in education. This year, our keynotes are Dr. Pedro Noguera, who is the Dean of the Rossier School of Education at USC in LA, and Dr. Maria Shun, who's the CEO of Ghana International School.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm.
So we're excited about that. And
it's coming.
It's coming.
Right.
Like very soon. Very soon. But we feel much more prepared this year. Like we got a year under our belt. We kind of know what we're doing.
Yeah. Well, so I'm curious because that in itself is a big part of the work of putting on a conference. What exactly goes into it? From finding the funding, thinking how far out that you plan it. Tell us more about that story.
So we start planning a year out, and we're really fortunate. So Ghana ASCD is an affiliate of ISD and ASCD in the States. And there are a lot of affiliates within the state. So it's a national/international organization, and then states can have their own chapter, I guess. So we have a lot of support from members in the states who want to help with planning, and so we we talk with others and like come up with ideas for the conference theme and the different strands that we're focusing on. And we have these like monthly meetings with the whole planning committee, and we have subcommittees who meet several times throughout the year as well. It feels a lot lighter this year because we learned so much. I mean, it's still a lot of work, but as far as securing funding, that is a challenge. Most of our funding has come from outside of Ghana. And I've learned, and this has been a challenge in my work in general as an educator, and especially as an education consultant here, that most of the funding for education does not come to West Africa. It goes to East Africa or South Africa. And so
Now, why is that?
I'm not really sure. I'm really not sure. But I can say what I've observed, because I've spent time in those places, is that some of those places, their approach to education is a little more progressive than what I've seen in a lot of West African countries, right? So one of the reasons I was attracted to South Africa is because they speak like a similar language of education, some of the places, right? Like, so project-based learning is built into some schools already, right? Or performance assessments and student-centered or learner-centered communities. All of those things were already they were popping up when I would do Google searches years ago. And like here is just now coming. So I think people are more apt to fund these like progressive models and see like how it might transform things more faster. Maybe, I'm not sure. But I really don't know. That's just my theory.
But that makes sense. And then also in my experience, when I went to Nairobi, I was just speaking to people in general, and most people had a really strong grasp of their history and just more knowledge generally than I often find here on the streets of Accra. And what I came to understand is that education became very, very important policy-wise. So everyone, like school, like it wasn't just lip service. Our free SHS and everyone's school, we have done it and done it disservice to a large degree, right? In the way that it's been implemented. But from the 80s, 90s, it's been very, very important. So somehow their curriculum also centers their stories somehow, so that they have these historical understandings of it. And I found that across generations. I didn't find too many people who didn't know their story. I mean, there probably maybe, but there was a lot of that. So it also is that the government, with institutions, are taking it more seriously. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That would be what I mean, it makes sense
to take it seriously. Yes.
I mean,
but
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I want to move into, because that funding question is very interesting. And then just in terms of what we've been talking about on the side is this idea of, are these institutions outdated? Do we need them anymore? Do we need a department or a Ministry of Education to govern how schools, and is a school the place that people need to learn anymore? Who's to say that we don't aggregate people who love work and then start a movement there? And then we understand, like, people will pay for quality. I was talking to my neighbor yesterday and they're like, yeah, the school's okay that my kids go to, but it's really just about convenience. So that speaks volumes. And so they are inside outside family, like the husband, he goes in the inside and out. So they have a trumpet instruction come to them. They have language instruction. So they are a supplementing family, but many don't have that opportunity. So where does curriculum sit in a world where maybe we don't need to have these institutions as the governing bodies? What are your thoughts on that?
I'm trying not to get myself in trouble with my response.
Okay, I get it. But yeah, because you do that work.
I
so
do
you have
do
to
that
be
work.
partnerships, partnered with them. Yeah.
I will say that the way schools function now, and I know I'm speaking to my kindred spirit over here around this, is solely to support capitalism. So these parents sending a kid to whatever school is because it's convenient so they can go to work, right? Oftentimes that's the structure, right? And I am a huge proponent of public education. I struggle with how much private education pervades here in the continent because it means so many other folks aren't getting access to these things, right? So I do think there is a place for a department or a ministry of education. I think, like all agencies, it could be improved. And I don't think schooling the way we do it now is useful at all for young people. It works for parents who work because their kid is somewhere during the day. But I do think that there's so many great models of learning that don't rely on traditional school structures. And watching the way of the world and technology and so on, I think it would behoove us to consider like apprenticeship models for young folks going outside of their community to learn, because it is an increasingly global world. I mean, we do it on our phones and online, but learning how to learn and collaborate cross-culturally, I think is super important as well. And again, I'm always going to talk about learning should be student inquiry led. Like, what are they curious about? Because that's going to help them figure out what they're good at, what they're interested in, where their passions lie, and will inform what they want to do with their lives. And we should start supporting that and cultivating it as soon as like they're ready, you know? And that can happen anywhere.
I love that. Okay, so you gave a safe answer. It's good.
Was it safe?
Yes. No one's going to come and say, hey, she said shut you down. No, they're not going to come do that. Not at all. At all. Okay, so this is all wonderful. And I want to get an understanding, as I know we're moving on time, and I want to be respectful of your time, of caregivers. So the teachable moment, like how now do you're a parent, there's, so beyond these buildings, there are these other people who could have so much impact.
Yes.
So tell us about the paper you wrote and where that kind of is a new and next in the education space.
So I used to work for an organization called PBL Works, Project-Based Learning Organization. And I was working there during the pandemic. And that's where the CEO and I decided to write this book, because everyone was at home. I was in Los Angeles with their children and freaking out. What do we do with our kids? Like, schools were trying to figure out how to go online. It wasn't going well for some folks. And it's like, how do we make life less scary for kids and fun? And what can we do with limited resources and, tap into what's around us? So that was the impetus for the book. And it was really just thinking about how can we explain project-based learning in a way that's accessible to everyone. And then we provided different project-based learning experiences they could do. I think there's 21 different activities with a guiding question, with suggested activities you can do, and so on, that should be pretty accessible. And it's not like anyone's going to be like, you did this wrong, you do it however. But it was meant to like let the young people in whatever spaces they were occupying during the pandemic have some agency over their learning, and like think about how they can make something interesting and maybe solve problems for our current reality. One of the projects was now that we're in a pandemic, like what would school look like now? Like what do we need? What do we know now about learning and school and so on? So that was the thinking behind it. And a few of my friends used it and really thanked me for sharing that resource. And I did some of the projects with my kids as well. So I think it was timely and it served its purpose.
It's still relevant.
And still relevant,
yeah. Evergreen.
And it's free. It's an ebook,
Oh, nice. Okay, that's definitely a link in the show notes, folks, because these are tools. Because I think we all have to take an active role and responsibility for nurturing future minds. That's kind of the tagline for my company.
Yeah.
It's so important, because a friend and I were speaking about how in the US in particular, is that we went from boomers to millennials as leaders. So there's a whole generation, the Gen Xers, that's us, that where are we in leadership? And unfortunately, we are the mayhem makers. So there's the us's, the you and I's that need to be the revolutionaries that are the salve for the Musks and the Thiels and the billionaire bros, because we're all the same generation. Like that's our generation that is wreaking havoc. So I encourage those of you who want to be different and have agency to be different, to especially Gen Xers, it's our time.
It is.
Yeah, it's our time. Okay, so let's talk about who you are when you're not working and thinking about schools and thinking about parenting and all those things. I know you're always doing those things, but I always like to ask if you're a reader, a watcher, or a listener. And what are some of your favorite reads, watches, or listens?
Oh my gosh, I'm all of those things.
Yay!
I'm all of those things. I'm currently reading a book called One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This, about the war against Palestine. It is tough. It is tough and beautiful.
Who's the author?
His name is Omar El-Akkad.
Show notes.
I also just finished reading a book from a friend and colleague called Finding Your Leadership Soul. And he's an educator. And he talks about his journey. He also worked on the East Coast and learning how to lead as a teacher. Now he's a leader of an organization with care and compassion and vulnerability. Beautiful. Watching. I haven't done as much watching lately, but I did watch Forever on Netflix.
Oh, you finished?
Ooh, yes.
Okay.
I had to binge watch that because it was like my LA vibes.
So
I was in it. And I thought it was such a beautiful story.
Yeah, I'm about 2 episodes in. I like it.
Yeah,
it's nice.
Cute. And then listening, I always listen to whatever Apple curates for me based on my likes. So it can be a little jazz, a little 90s hip hop, or neo soul, those kinds of things. But yeah, I listen to something every day, but no one in particular right now.
Got it. Those sound good new finds for reading and watching if you haven't already. And so new and next, before we go to final thoughts, we know you have your conference coming up. We know you're going to be doing a rebrand, but is there anything else that's new and next for you? Like, where do you see yourself in the next?
Oh, new and next. So, I've been working on a children's show.
Yes, I do.
And we are doing some editing right now. And next, I hope it gets picked up and we can do more of that show and more of some other shows.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of my
new platforms.
Yeah. Like my creative side is really interested in exploring that. Of course, all related to education in some way.
Yeah.
So that's new and next. Also, I'm working on writing more this year. I've already started to do that. So I hope to get more out in the world.
Nice. So when you're saying writing on the education side, or
just on the education side for now.
Got it. Yeah. Okay. All right. I feel like I'm seriously zen in this place. I'm just like, I can just keep talking. But life calls. So do you have any last thoughts you'd like to share with our listeners before we sign off?
Well, I would invite everyone to come to our conference. You can either come in person if you're in Ghana or are excited to come to Ghana, or you can join virtually. You can find out more about that. I'm sure there's going to be a link, but ghascd.org. That's this July. We would love to see you.
What's the name of the conference?
It's the International Educators Summit.
International Educators Summit. And we're all educators, folks, so get to know something new.
That's right.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Thank you, Laury.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Laury. So lovely to be with you today.
Likewise.
All right, Glocal citizens, this has been another episode of the podcast. You can catch us Tuesdays with new episodes at glocalcitizenspod.com or wherever you get your podcasts. Please like, share, subscribe, leave us a review. Leave us a review. Yes. Yeah, do that. It helps people find great content on the internet. And we believe that we're offering some great content. So leave us a review. All right, then. Until next time. Bye for now.